I was gone for just a week to get braces and save some money. And he flew off to Greece with our older neighbor and thought I'd never know. I used to think the Maldives were paradise. Every morning began the same. The sun broke through the sheer curtains, painting golden streaks across the white walls of our small staff apartment. The sound of waves crashing just meters away blended with the rustle of palm leaves outside the window. I'd stretch, brush my hair back, and listen to his steady breathing beside me. 10 years. 10 years of waking up like this. Of working side by side in a place where people came to escape reality. Where love bloomed over candlelit dinners and turquoise waters. Where every day was a photo from a honeymoon album. And I believe we were one of those pictures. We worked at a 5-star resort, he in guest services, me in reservations. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. The job paid well for the island. Our meals were provided, and we lived a stone's throw from the ocean. We didn't need much. At night, we'd sit under the stars and sip mango cocktails at guests left behind, laughing about the latest entitled honeymooner or drunk bachelorette party. He wasn't the most romantic man, not the type to write poems or surprise me with roses, but he made me laugh. He always remembered how I liked my coffee, cold, strong, and with a splash of coconut milk. And when I was sick last year, he stayed home for 3 days and fed me soup he barely knew how to make. That's love, right? When I told him I needed to fly out for a week to get braces, he didn't object. He helped me book the cheapest flight, and even packed me snacks for the journey. I didn't want to leave him for even a day, but the price difference was too good to pass up. Orthodontics on the mainland were 5 times cheaper than on the islands. I promised to FaceTime every day. And I did. He didn't. He always had excuses, Wi-Fi issues, long shifts, he forgot. I didn't think much of it. He'd always been forgetful, always the last to respond in group chats. But still, something gnawed at me, a tension I couldn't name. When I came back, the sun was shining, the sand was warm, and everything felt the same. But it wasn't. I couldn't explain it, but I felt unwelcome in my own life, like the place had moved on, without me in just 1 week. It started with the little things. He wasn't at the dock when I arrived. No hug, no flowers, not even a message saying, "Welcome back." Just silence. When I reached the apartment, he was lounging on the couch, scrolling his phone like I'd only been gone 5 minutes. "Hey," I said. "Oh, hey," he replied, barely looking up. "How was the flight?" Cold, impersonal, like I was a colleague back from sick leave. I told myself he was tired. We all work long hours. Maybe I was being sensitive. The second day back, I ran into Yusuf. Yusuf was a strange man, mid-30s, wiry, with eyes too sharp for someone who was always giggling to himself. He worked in supply but often disappeared for hours, once reappearing covered in sand and claiming he'd just needed a moment with the earth. He once got caught stealing bananas from the kitchen. Not 1 or 2, a whole crate. Said he was building a fruit sculpture. Management wrote him up. We all laughed about it. He wasn't dangerous. Just off. So when he walked up to me near the laundry shack and said, "You know, your boyfriend went to Greece with that old neighbor lady," I thought he was messing with me. "What are you talking about, Yusuf?" I saw them. At the airport, they were holding hands. She was wearing red. I stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or slap him. The neighbor he was referring to lived 2 huts down. A 40-something woman with 2 loud boys who always tracked sand into the common area. She wasn't ugly, but she definitely wasn't his type, or so I thought. Yusuf just smiled, bowed slightly, and wandered off humming something that sounded like an old lullaby. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Yusuf's words in my mind. I hadn't checked his passport since returning, hadn't even seen his travel bag. Something about the casual way he greeted me, the coldness in his tone, the way he kept his phone face down. Everything suddenly felt wrong. I waited until he left for his night shift, then turned the apartment upside down. I didn't expect to find anything. Maybe a forgotten gift, an old message. But not this. His passport was shoved under bed, between the mattress and the frame, like he'd hidden it. My hands were shaking before I even opened it. There it was. A fresh entry stamp. Athens. dated 3 days into my trip. I dropped the passport. It didn't make sense. He couldn't have afforded it. He hated flying. He'd told me he was working double shifts. And yet, while I was getting my teeth fixed, he was off in Greece with her. I sat on the floor for a long time. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just numb. Like someone had reached inside and turned off all the switches at once. The next morning, I asked him how work had been last week. Same old, he said, sipping coffee. Guests were annoying. Had to cover for a sick guy. I stared at him. Did you go anywhere? Huh. Last week. Did you travel? He looked up, met my eyes, and in that split second, I saw it, that flicker, that hesitation, that tiny crack in a mask. No, he said slowly. Why? I didn't answer, just nodded, stood up, walked outside, and laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so incredibly stupid. 10 years, a decade of my life, and he'd thrown it all away for a woman with 2 screaming kids and a permanent frown line. On an island full of sun-kissed tourists and beauty queens, he chose her. I didn't cry. Not then. There'd be time for that later. Right now, I had to figure out how to pack 10 years into a suitcase, and whether I want to tell him I knew or just vanish the way he had. The next few days passed like fog. He was there, eating, sleeping, working, but it was as if a wall had gone up between us. Not built overnight, but revealed. I started to notice more than just the silence. He didn't touch me, not even the absent-minded brush of a hand or a quick kiss before bed. If I stood too close, he found a reason to step away. If I asked something that required more than a yes or no, he acted like I was bothering him. And worst of all, he smiled at his phone more than he smiled at me. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Maybe I was afraid of what I'd hear. Maybe I wanted more evidence. Maybe I needed to see just how far he'd go with the lie. Whatever the reason, I played my role, his loyal, clueless girlfriend. I cooked. I folded his laundry. I asked about his day with just enough curiosity to sound convincing. But at night, when he fell asleep, I'd stare at the ceiling, wondering how long he'd been gone emotionally before he'd physically left for Greece. Did he fall in love with her? Was it even about love? Or just convenience? Or sex? I didn't know what was worse. The neighbor wasn't someone I ever thought twice about. She was plain, worn down from life. Always looked tired. Her boys were loud and always fighting. She wasn't mean, just disinterested in other people. We barely spoke in all the years we lived near each other. But apparently, she had something I didn't. He still hadn't mentioned anything. No confession. No apology. No guilt. He acted like life was perfectly normal. So I went digging again. I found his travel bag buried behind the coats in the closet. It still had the airline sticker on the handle. Inside were receipts from a hotel in Santorini. 2 drinks. Room service. A jewelry box receipt. A handwritten note on the back of a postcard. Too smudged to read. My hand shook as I flipped through the items, heart pounding. He'd taken her on a trip that I always dreamed of. I couldn't help but imagine it. Him walking her through narrow streets, watching the sunset on a white balcony, kissing her under string lights. I could see it all, because I'd imagined doing those exact things with him. He just replaced me in the picture. That night, he came home late. I was already in bed, pretending to be asleep. He undressed in the dark, careful not to wake me. But I was wide awake, staring at the wall, listening to him move around like a stranger, breathing in a room that no longer felt like ours. The next morning, I told him I was going to mainland for a day. I said I needed a dental checkup, which wasn't a total lie. I'd schedule one just in case I got asked for proof. He said okay like it didn't matter. When I got to the city, I didn't go to the clinic first. I went to a small electronics shop and bought a mini audio recorder, one of those USB stick-looking things that could sit under a table or inside a bag. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed to hear it from someone's mouth, his preferably. That night, I planted it near the window, just beneath the kitchen table. I knew they sometimes met outside after dark. I'd seen shadows move across the sand. I waited in the bedroom, lights off, heart thudding in my chest. He didn't meet her that night. But the next morning, I played the recording. It wasn't perfect. The wind distorted parts. But I heard enough. Her voice, his voice, laughter, whispers, and a sentence that burned itself into my brain. She's too soft to figure it out. You worry too much. He said that. About me. Soft. Maybe I was. I took the recorder, placed it back in its case, and put it under the bed with the passport. I didn't confront him that morning either. Instead, I made breakfast. French toast, his favorite. He looked surprised but not suspicious. You're up early, he said, stretching. Yeah, I smiled. Felt like doing something nice. He nodded, took a bite, and never even looked at me. He had no idea that with each word he didn't say, he gave me permission to leave him. That day, I spoke with a friend who worked in human resources, asked what it would take to change staff housing assignments. She was discreet. She knew something was wrong. I didn't have to explain. The next few days, I made plans. Quietly, carefully, I arranged to store my things at a friend's place. I canceled my shifts using vacation time. I let my manager know I was taking a short break for personal reasons. And then, the day before I planned to leave, I saw her. She was standing by the laundry shack, yelling at one of her sons. He was covered in mud and holding a broken toy. She looked worn out, angry, just tired of life. And I realized something. She didn't win. She wasn't some seductress who stole him from me. She was just the next person he used to feel needed. The next woman who wouldn't ask too many questions. Someone too busy to notice when he started lying. I didn't feel rage, just pity for both of them. That night, I sat across from him on the couch. He was on his phone, watching videos. I asked him, "Do you love me?" He looked up. "Of course I do." He said it too fast, too flat, like a pre-recorded line. I nodded. Good to know. He didn't ask why I asked. Didn't look concerned. Didn't even set down his phone. He just nodded and kept scrolling. The next morning, I was gone. No note, no message, nothing. Let him wonder for once. Let him feel the silence he'd buried me in for months. Let him taste the emptiness he'd created. I was done proving I was enough for someone who didn't even notice when I stopped trying. I stayed with a friend for the first week. Her place was small, barely room for 2 people and a cat that hated strangers, but felt like a sanctuary. She didn't ask too many questions, just offer me tea and a place to breathe. That was all I needed. At night, I lay awake replaying every conversation, every glance, every weird excuse he gave over the past year. It was like watching a horror film you'd already seen, but this time you noticed all the signs before the twist. He didn't call. Not once. I thought maybe he'd pretend to be worried, that he'd message one of my coworkers, ask around, try to track me down. But nothing. Silence. As if I had vanished into thin air, and he wasn't interested in solving the mystery. That told me everything I needed to know. The man I spent 10 years with couldn't be bothered to wonder where I went. A few days later, I walked to our staff building during his shift change. I knew he'd be in the common area, talking to someone or pretending to be busy. I just needed to see him once, to confirm something I already suspected. And there he was, leaning against the wall, drink in hand, laughing. Not a trace of worry, not even a crack in the performance. He hadn't lost anything. I had 10 years of my life, loyalty, trust, dreams of a future we'd never get to build. It was all in the past now, stuffed in a dusty drawer with other mistakes I promised myself never to repeat. I turned around and walked away before he noticed me. I wasn't going to let him fake some kind of surprise or remorse. I didn't need a scene. I just needed clarity. And I got it. I applied for a short-term job on another island. Smaller, quieter, still tourist-heavy, but less pressure. My friend helped me get the transfer through a contact. A few forms, a quick check with HR, and I was gone. Just like that. I left the Maldives part of my life, like someone exiting a stage play mid-act. I didn't want to see the ending. I already knew how it went. New job, new uniform, Same tired smile for strangers asking about cocktails and towels and snorkel gear. But at least I was moving. At least I had something to do with my hands. I blocked his number, deleted our photos, threw away the necklace he gave me 3 birthdays ago. The one I used to wear like armor, believing it meant something. It didn't. Not anymore. 3 weeks passed before I heard about him again. One of my co-workers mentioned him during lunch. She didn't know our history, just said he'd been seen getting cozy with the neighbor, the same woman, the one with the tired eyes and sagging shoulders. It wasn't a surprise, just confirmation. Apparently, he'd been spending nights there, bringing her takeout, playing with her kids in the courtyard. I should have felt something. Anger, bitterness, sadness. But I didn't. All I felt was nothing, like a wound that had already scarred over. You poke at it sometimes to see if it still hurts, and one day, it just doesn't. Then the letter came. Not a message, not a call. A letter, handwritten, folded awkwardly into an envelope that smelled like old paper. No return address, just my name. Inside was a single page. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I think I messed everything up. I miss you. I miss us. I didn't realize what I had until you were gone. Please talk to me. I read it twice. It took me 3 trips to move everything out. 10 years of memories reduced to 2 duffel bags, a suitcase, and a cracked photo frame I had meant to take but couldn't leave behind. The apartment wasn't even mine, technically. It belonged to the resort, but it had felt like ours. Now it just smelled like mildew and betrayal. I didn't see him again after that morning. I left the key on the counter, wiped down the counters even though I didn't have to, and took one last look around. There was a dent in the wall where he once threw a shoe while chasing a cockroach. A chipped tile in the bathroom. We kept saying we'd report. That stupid little sticker of a dolphin on the fridge we picked up on a guest tour like teenagers. It all felt like someone else's life. Someone naive and distant. A version of me who didn't double-check passports or hide her phone just in case. I moved into temporary housing at the new resort. The room was smaller, darker. The AC didn't work right, and the bed sagged in the middle. But it was mine, and it was quiet. Nobody there expected anything from me, except for a polite smile and a towel count. I threw myself into the job. Checked bookings, restocked brochures, answered calls from guests asking why there weren't more gluten-free options. It was numbing work, exactly what I needed. I didn't talk about what happened, not with coworkers, not with my friend who helped me move. I didn't even message my sister, though she had left me a string of voicemails after hearing I'd left him. You okay? Call me. Want to come down there? I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. But something strange happened around week 3. I started laughing again. Not the forced, public relations kind of laugh I wore at the front desk, but real, unexpected, throat-warming laughter. At dumb things, like a tourist falling off a paddleboard or the way the new intern mispronounced aperitif during a training session. My co-worker Mia had this dry sense of humor that caught me off guard more than once, and I found myself enjoying her company more than I wanted to admit. She didn't know my history. She just saw me as the new girl from another island, and I liked that. I liked not being someone's partner, not being half of a we. Just me. I even started sleeping again. Not well, not deeply, but without the nightmares. Without waking up reaching for someone who wasn't there. One night, Mia and I were sitting by the shore after a long shift, eating leftover fruit from the buffet. The moonlight turned everything silver. I remember peeling a mango and saying, half to myself, I never thought it would end like that. She didn't ask what I meant. She just handed me a napkin and said, they rarely do. Maybe that's why I trusted her. Maybe that's why, when the letter came, I didn't immediately tear it up. The second letter arrived folded neatly in my locker. Same handwriting. No envelope this time. Just a name at the bottom. His. I know I don't deserve your time, but I have to try. Please meet me. Just once. I stared at it for a full minute before crumpling it and dropping it in the trash. I thought that would be the end of it, but the next night, there he was, outside the staff entrance. Shirt wrinkled, eyes hollow. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. Or maybe just someone who'd realized too late that time doesn't forgive. I just want 5 minutes, he said as I walked past. I kept walking. You were right, he called after me. About everything. About her. About me. I stopped, not because I wanted to talk, but because a part of me needed to hear what excuse he'd try to feed me, what apology he thought could rewind a decade of erosion. She was nothing, he said. I don't even know why I turned around. Don't say that. I cut in. Don't insult me with that line. She was something, enough for you to throw me away. He looked stunned, like he expected tears. Or maybe forgiveness. You could have told me, I said. You could have at least given me that. I didn't want to hurt you. No, you just didn't want to be the bad guy. His lips parted, closed. He looked like he might cry. But I was done collecting his guilt. I'd spent enough years holding his emotions while mine withered. I'm happy, I said. I'm not broken. And I don't want you back. I never stopped loving you, he whispered. Then you should have acted like it. I left him there, standing under the dim glow of the security light, surrounded by mosquitoes and regret. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt quiet, like closing a door you knew would never open again. Later that night, Mia knocked on my door with 2 beers and a playlist full of sad girl anthems. You okay? She asked. Yeah, I said. I think I am. She raised a brow. That's new. I smiled. It was. People talk, especially on islands. It didn't take long for me to realize that I was the only one who didn't know. The whispers didn't come all at once. They crept in slowly, like the tide. A few looks in the staff cafeteria. A couple of half-finished conversations that ended the moment I walked into the room. Someone casually mentioning my name in a sentence, then awkwardly switching subjects when I got too close. At first, I thought I was being paranoid, that maybe I was still shaken from the betrayal, seeing ghosts where there were none. But then I overheard a conversation outside the laundry room. 2 girls from housekeeping, both younger, always glued to their phones when they weren't folding towels. They were talking about him, laughing, and she still doesn't know, one of them said, giggling. Maybe he really loves a neighbor, the other replied. He always brought her extra dessert plates. They didn't see me standing behind the crates, but I saw them, heard every word. I didn't confront them. I just walked away. Something in me broke open then, not in pain, not in grief, but in clarity. I hadn't just been cheated on. I'd been lied to by everyone. The staff, the so-called friends, the people who smiled at me every day, who invited me to potlucks and birthday drinks, who said, we're like family here. They all knew, and not one of them told me. That night, I sat on the edge of my new bed in the quiet guest house, scrolling through old photos, birthday cakes, sunset selfies, him holding my hand with that crooked grin, like he owned the whole damn island. None of it felt real anymore. I didn't want revenge. I wanted distance. I started applying for jobs outside the resort circuit, mainland offices, hospitality admin roles, even an opening at a cultural center in Colombo. I just needed to be somewhere else. Somewhere I wasn't the girl whose boyfriend left her for the neighbor with kids. I didn't tell anyone. Didn't even tell my friend I was planning to leave. I needed the silence to make up my mind. But the island wouldn't let me go that easily. 2 nights later, Yusuf found me. I was on the beach, watching the tide come in. He walked over barefoot, holding a coconut like it was a sacred offering. Did you read the stars? He asked. Not tonight. He sat beside me in the sand, surprisingly calm. You know, I tried to tell you. I know, I said softly. You were right. That man, he's like driftwood. Looks strong until the waves rot him from the inside. I didn't laugh. He wasn't joking. He placed a coconut between us and stood. You deserve more. A real home, not a story where you're the fool. Then he walked away, humming. I stared at the waves for a long time. For once, Yusuf made more sense than anyone else. The next morning, I packed everything I hadn't already left behind. I had 1 suitcase, a small box of keepsakes, and a folder with job offers. I typed out a resignation letter and slid it under the door of the HR office before sunrise. No goodbye party. No dramatic announcement. Just silence. By noon, I was on a boat heading back to the mainland. The air smelled different. Not salty, but sharp and electric. Like I was entering a new world where his face, his voice, his betrayal couldn't reach me. But even then, a part of me knew this wasn't the end. It was just a pause between chapters. The breath you take before the Real story begins. And I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ready to write it myself. It took me a few weeks to truly settle into my new life. The island I had transferred to was smaller, quieter, and didn't come with ghosts hiding in every hallway. The staff quarters were more modest, the workload lighter, and the guests, mostly older couples and solo travelers, seemed less demanding than the honeymooners I used to cater to. I wasn't trying to start over. I was just trying to exist. For the first time in years, I slept through the night. No loud neighbors. No pacing in the kitchen at 2 a.m. No muffled arguments through paper-thin walls. Just the hum of ceiling fans and the distant hush of waves lapping against the shore. I didn't miss him. I missed who I thought he was. And sometimes that was worse. There were moments, brushing my teeth, slicing fruit, folding my uniform, when my mind drifted back to old routines. The way he used to steal bites of my food before I finished cooking. The stupid nicknames we gave to guests. The way he'd whistle the same off-key tune every time he washed the dishes. But memories are like old clothes. They don't always fit the way you remember. Every time I started to romanticize it, I reminded myself of the passport, of the silence, of the look in his eyes when I asked him if he'd gone anywhere. That flicker of guilt he tried to hide behind a tired shrug. That wasn't love. That was comfort, familiarity, and maybe a little bit of fear. Fear of being alone, of starting again, of admitting we'd wasted a decade pretending something was still there. One evening, as the sun began to dip behind the palms, I sat alone on the beach behind the staff quarters. I had a thermos of tea and a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. The air smelled like salt and grilled fish from the nearby guest barbecue. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't have to turn around. I already knew. He sat down a few feet away, not saying anything at first, just stared at the horizon like we used to, like nothing had changed, but everything had. I thought, maybe this was your spot. He said finally, his voice low, figure if I waited long enough, I'd see you. I didn't answer, didn't even look at him. I'm not here to argue, he said. I needed to see you. I sipped my tea, hoping the silence would speak for me, but he kept talking. She told me to let it go, said it was none of her business. But I couldn't. I needed to explain. I turned to him then. Explain what? That while I was gone for a medical appointment, you flew across the world with a woman you swore you barely knew, that you hid your passport and lied straight to my face. His mouth opened, then closed. No excuses this time. Just shame. I don't know why it happened, he muttered. I felt like something was missing. No, I said, don't give me that. You had 10 years to talk to me, to tell me if you were unhappy, bored, lost, whatever. But you didn't. You chose to sneak around, to build something behind my back instead of fixing what was in front of you. He looked down at his hands, digging his fingers into sand like a nervous child. She was just easy, he said. She didn't expect much, didn't ask for anything. And with you, I always felt like I had to be more. I stood up then, every muscle in my body buzzing with heat. I never asked you to be more. I only ever asked you to be honest. And you couldn't even do that. He stood up too, brushing sand from his jeans. I'm sorry, he said. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed to say it. I nodded once, then say it, and leave. He looked at me for a long time, maybe waiting for a crack in my armor, a softening, a sign that I missed him enough to let him back in. But it never came. He left without another word. And I stood there, watching the tide roll in and erase the footprints he'd left behind. Later that week, I received a letter at the front desk. No envelope this time, just a folded piece of hotel stationery. It wasn't signed, but I didn't need a signature. We were broken long before you found out. I just didn't have the courage to say it. I never deserved 10 years of you. I tore it up and tossed it in the trash. It wasn't cruelty. It was closure. Because sometimes the cleanest endings come not with slamming doors or shouted fights, but with silence, with peace, with the realization that the love you thought you lost never really existed. It was a version of you holding up a version of them, pretending it was solid, but it was just sand, and the tide had finally come in. It was strange how quickly life adapted to absence. After his visit, something in me settled, like a puzzle piece I didn't know was missing had finally snapped into place. Not because it brought closure, but because it reminded me just how much weight I had been carrying for so long. I no longer looked over my shoulder, no longer checked my phone for messages I knew wouldn't come. His face faded from my memory in pieces. First his laugh, then his smell, then the way he used to stand behind me while brushing his teeth, all of it slipping quietly into the background. I wasn't mourning anymore. I was rebuilding. I started saying yes more. To after-work beach walks with coworkers. To night swims under stars. To the idea that maybe, just maybe, I didn't need to understand why everything fell apart to begin creating something new. Then one afternoon, while cleaning out an old drawer in my new staff room, I found the photo. It was tucked between some spare receipts and sunscreen packets. A small printed snapshot, me and him, both sunburned and squinting, standing in front of the resort pier. It was from our 3rd year on the island. We'd just finished a double shift, and he'd insisted on taking a photo to remember the worst day of our lives. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel sad. I just shook my head and thought, how many things do we hold on to thinking they mean something, when really they're just paper and ink? I tore the photo in half, and then in half again. A week later, Yusuf was fired. I wasn't surprised. I heard rumors before the official announcement. Something about missing supplies, another strange outburst near the guest villas, a broken ice machine that wasn't exactly broken until he touched it. But I did feel something close to pity. He'd been the one to open my eyes, however clumsily. He might have been unstable, but he told me the truth when no one else would. He disappeared quietly. No goodbyes, just a note on the bulletin board. Effective immediately, Yusuf will no longer be working at the resort. I never saw him again. The days kept moving forward. Tourists came and went. Rainy season crept in with its heavy clouds and quiet afternoons. I started writing again, something I hadn't done in years. Just short thoughts, reflections, lists of places I wanted to visit someday. Things I'd never done because I'd been waiting for someone else to do them with me. One night, a co-worker asked if I want to go on a boat trip the following Sunday. A day off, some snorkeling, cold beer, and a reef I'd never seen. I hesitated. Old habits whispered, you don't do things alone. But I wasn't alone. Not anymore. Not in the way that matters. I said yes. That Sunday, as the boat cut across turquoise water and the wind tangled my hair, I stood at the bow and smiled. Not because I had forgotten the past, but because it no longer held me hostage. I was free, and sometimes freedom isn't about leaving something behind. It's about realizing it never deserved to stay with you in the first place. It had been nearly 2 months since I'd last thought of him in any serious way. His letters had stopped, the visits ceased, and for the first time in over a decade, I felt invisible to the man who once claimed to love me most. That was a gift. But strange things have a way of finding you just when you think you finally moved on. I was finishing my shift at the towel station, folding the last of the day's laundry under the fading glow of a pink sky, when someone said my name. Not loudly, not urgently, just quietly, like a memory whispered into the wind. I turned, expecting to see one of the staff or a guest I'd forgotten to check out. But it wasn't either. It was her, the neighbor, the woman with the permanent scowl, and the 2 boys who never wore shoes. She stood just a few feet away, arms crossed, wearing a faded sundress and the kind of tired expression only years of disappointment could etch into a face. We hadn't spoken. Not once. Not before. Not after. She had existed in my peripheral vision. A question I decided not to ask. And yet here she was. I didn't come to fight, she said, voice low. I said nothing. I didn't trust myself to speak. She took a small step forward. I just thought you should hear it. Hear what? That it wasn't your fault. I blinked. What? He told me all kinds of things, she said, about how miserable he was, about how you never listened, about how you didn't care. She looked down at her hands. I believed him. For a while, I thought maybe he really was trapped, that he needed saving. My throat tightened. He doesn't change, she continued. He just changes the story, makes himself the victim until someone new gives him what he wants. I still couldn't find the right words, but I didn't need to. She wasn't really talking to me. I kicked him out last week, she said, caught him messaging someone else. Of course he was. She shrugged like it didn't even matter anymore. Just thought you should know. I wanted to tell her. She didn't need to explain. That I didn't hate her. That we'd both been caught in the same illusion. Playing different roles in a drama we didn't write. But instead, I simply nodded. Thanks, I said, for telling me. She gave a small nod back. Take care of yourself. And then she was gone, just like he had been. Later that night, I lay in bed thinking about how strange it was, how women are always left to clean up the messes men leave behind, how we reach out to each other across the wreckage, how we still manage to offer kindness, even when the world gives us every reason not to. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel smug or satisfied. Just done. Completely, utterly done. Not just with him, but with the version of myself that ever needed his approval to feel whole. I turned off my phone, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I slept all the way through the night. No dreams. No ghosts. Only quiet. The kind that heals, not haunts. Some things never return the way they were. A cracked plate might be glued, a wilted flower watered, but the flaw, the memory of collapse remains. That was me, not broken, but no longer smooth around the edges. Time passed. Not fast, not slow, just steady, like waves smoothing jagged coral. I stopped counting the days since I left him. The anniversary of my discovery came and went without a second thought. I no longer avoided places we used to visit, nor did I replay conversations in my head like old cassette tapes. The past had finally faded into a place where I could glance back without flinching. Then, one night I saw his name again. Not in a message, not even in my contacts. It was a shared post on a coworker's story. Someone I didn't follow, someone I barely knew. But there he was, sitting at a bar with a group of unfamiliar faces, laughing, holding a beer, acting like the world had never fallen apart. It didn't sting, but it did remind me of something I hadn't thought about in a while. The version of myself who would have seen that and spiraled, who would have zoomed in, read into every smile, every hand on his shoulder, every flicker of background detail. That girl was gone, and in her place was someone tired of dragging around other people's baggage. I clicked past it without hesitation, and that moment, insignificant as it may have seemed, was proof that I had truly moved on. A few days later, a young woman started working at the resort. She was new to the island, wide-eyed and nervous, tripping over her own words at guest check-ins. I saw her drop a tray of water glasses and nearly burst into tears. I knelt down beside her and helped her clean it up. "You okay?" I asked gently. She nodded too quickly. "Yeah, I'm just trying not to mess everything up." "You won't," I said. "You're just getting started." Later that evening, she knocked on my door with 2 small cups of pineapple juice. "Thank you," she said, "for being kind. Everyone here seems busy or tired." I smiled. "We are, but tired people remember kindness." She stayed for an hour. Then, too, she told me about the fiancé she left back home, about how unsure she was if she made the right decision to take the job. I listened, offered no advice, just space, because sometimes that's all we really need. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. Sunlight spilled through my curtains. The sound of waves drifted in from the shore. Familiar, peaceful, but different. Not because the island had changed, because I had. I made coffee, sat on the porch, watched the staff bicycles roll past, and thought about the woman I had been when I first came here. So hopeful, so in love, so certain of things that would never last. And I didn't resent her. She did her best. She believed in someone who didn't deserve it. She made mistakes, trusted the wrong things. But she learned, she grew, and she survived. And now she was free. It didn't end with fireworks or breakdowns or dramatic confrontations. There was no one final moment where everything was neatly tied together. Life, I learned, rarely grants you that kind of cinematic luxury. It ends in quiet, in the way you stop thinking about them every day, in the way you walk by a place you once visited together and don't flinch, in the way your heart no longer races when you hear their name. That's how it ended for me. I didn't chase revenge. I didn't spend months trying to make him feel the way he made me feel. I just kept going, kept waking up, kept breathing through the ache until the ache wasn't there anymore. Some stories don't get justice. They just fade. One day, as I was organizing towels in the beach shack, I found a necklace tangled in the corner of a drawer. It was the one he gave me, the one I thought I'd thrown away. I held it in my hand for a while. The chain had tarnished. The charm had a small scratch. It didn't shimmer like it used to, just an old piece of metal carrying too much memory. I walked outside and tossed it into the sea, not out of spite, not to curse him or bury the past, just to let it go, let it drift far from shore, carried by the same waves that had once been a soundtrack to our love story. The ocean had seen our beginnings. It could have the end, too. Weeks passed. The new girl settled in. She stopped apologizing for every mistake. She made friends, found her rhythm. Sometimes she asked me for advice. Other times we just sat in silence, sipping juice after our shifts, watching the sky melt into colors over the water. I liked the silence. Not the silence that once meant distance and suspicion, but the kind that felt earned, peaceful, full of space. One evening, she asked me, "Do you ever regret it? The years you spent with him?" I thought for a moment, then shook my head. No, I don't regret loving someone. I regret who he chose to be, but not who I was. She nodded slowly, and I knew she understood. Some nights, I walk barefoot along the beach after the last guests have gone to bed. The stars are brighter here. The world feels softer, quieter. I still think about him sometimes, but not with pain, with perspective. He was a chapter, not the whole book, and I am still writing, still turning pages, still discovering what comes next. And for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to find out.